Atlanta International Airport. 9:12 a.m. Dr. Ava Montgomery approached Gate 3 with a quiet, deliberate calm, the kind of grace only years of discipline and dignity could cultivate. She handed over her passport and business-class boarding pass without a word, expecting nothing more than the usual scan and nod. Instead, what she got was a long, condescending stare from the gate agent, a woman named Susan, whose smirk deepened the moment she looked up from the name on the screen. "Are you sure this is your ticket?" she asked, her voice dipped in disbelief. Ava didn't flinch. She simply nodded and replied, "Yes, it is." Susan scanned the passport. The system beeped, a soft chime, not an alarm. A routine flag, a common federal database match. It wasn't a red alert. It wasn't even a confirmed issue. But Susan's eyes lit up like she'd found her gotcha moment. She leaned forward and hissed just loud enough for the passengers nearby to hear. "There's a problem. This passport looks suspicious. Might be fake." People began to turn. A white man 2 rows over glanced up from his phone. A flight attendant froze mid-step. Ava, still composed, offered, "I can provide additional ID. You're welcome to call a supervisor." But Susan wasn't looking for verification. She was looking for a stage. "You people always have a story, don't you?" she muttered. And then, before Ava or anyone else could stop her, Susan took the passport, held it up like evidence in a courtroom, and tore it straight down the middle. The sound of paper ripping echoed louder than any announcement overhead. Gasps followed. "You won't be flying today," she snapped, tossing the shredded pieces onto the counter like trash. "Security," she barked. "Fraud at Gate 3." A uniformed officer began to approach. No one moved to help. No one dared speak. The moment turned silent and still, like the eye of a storm. Ava didn't argue. She didn't scream. She didn't plead. She just stood there, head high, gaze steady, as the pieces of her identity fluttered to the floor. In that second, she wasn't a PhD or a federal inspector. She was just a black woman in business class being told she didn't belong. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a glitch. It was a choice. And millions watching know this scene by heart, not because it's rare, but because it's routine. This is how racial bias unfolds in plain sight, through travel discrimination, unchecked authority, and the weaponization of doubt. But what Susan didn't know, couldn't possibly imagine, was who Ava truly was, and what she was about to set in motion. Dr. Ava Montgomery sat in the small, windowless room near gate security holding, her hands resting calmly in her lap. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the dull gray walls. A security officer across the table flipped through notes like he was trying to find a reason not to believe her. Her name had been flagged in the system, he said, possibly linked to a no-fly list. "A coincidence," Ava replied evenly. "A common name. That's all it is." The officer didn't look convinced. His eyes scanned her plain slacks, her soft gray cardigan, the tidy ponytail at the nape of her neck. No designer bag, no flashy accessories. Just the kind of quiet, composed presence that some mistake for threat when it walks in the wrong skin. What no one in that room knew was that Ava had already documented 3 separate incidents of racial profiling by this airline over the past month. She had flown under different names, sat in different classes, and watched how passengers who looked like her were treated differently than others, with questions, suspicion, delays. This was supposed to be her final flight before submitting a formal compliance report to the FAA. She hadn't expected it to escalate, not like this. The gate agent, Susan, had overstepped, but not by accident. She saw a black woman in business class and made a choice: to challenge, to embarrass, to humiliate. And now Ava was being treated like a criminal, with her passport in pieces and her professional identity erased in one public moment. As the minutes ticked by, Ava watched how the staff moved around her. None of them made eye contact. One whispered to another and glanced toward the glass. They thought she was no one. But Ava was trained to notice patterns, track inconsistencies, and file them meticulously. Every interaction here, the refusal to verify her ID, the delay in contacting a supervisor, the snide remarks, would make it into her report. But this wasn't just about a file anymore. This was personal. A soft buzz came from her phone, still in airplane mode but allowed during the review. She tapped the lock screen briefly with her fingerprint. The notification was simple. Trigger sent, watch activated. Back in Washington, D.C., the FAA's Internal Affairs Division received the signal. Ava had designed it herself, an internal protocol for field agents to quietly report discrimination or obstruction while undercover. Within seconds, the system flagged the gate's security logs, uploaded time-stamped camera footage, and locked in Susan's voice from the last 30 seconds before the passport was destroyed. At the same time, in another part of the airport, a woman dressed as a maintenance tech looked up from a control panel and adjusted her earpiece. She was FAA, too, another inspector embedded in the airport staff, ready to assist if Ava's mission encountered escalation. And it had. Ava exhaled, still silent, still composed. She didn't need to yell. The wheels were already in motion. What the airline didn't realize was that they were now under full compliance review. Everything they did next would either expose the rot or cover it deeper. The officer across from her cleared his throat. "We've contacted the Department of Homeland Security to verify your name," he said. "You'll have to wait." Ava raised an eyebrow slightly. "You could have verified it through CBP's secure traveler system. I'm registered. But that would have required a neutral process, not profiling." He paused, caught off guard that she even knew what that system was. But Ava didn't elaborate. She wasn't here to educate him. She was here to test him. And he was failing. Meanwhile, outside Gate 3, passengers whispered. A young man checked X and saw the video. It was already being reposted by travel influencers, civil rights attorneys, and aviation watchdogs. The caption read, "Black woman's passport ripped by gate agent over system flag. She never raised her voice. This is the face of travel discrimination." The comment section boiled over. "This is exactly why I carry 2 IDs. You're one scan away from being stripped of humanity." She didn't resist. She didn't yell. But they treated her like she forged her way into business class. They always say it's about security, but it's never about security when the passenger is white. Back inside the holding room, Ava heard nothing of the storm brewing online. She didn't need to. She had seen it before. What mattered now was staying in character, keeping calm, and collecting everything. Her phone buzzed again. This time, "Additional FAA personnel en route. Sit tight." The officer looked up, confused as he received a ping on his own system. His terminal was locked. His face changed. Miss Montgomery," he began, now unsure. "Can you confirm again who you work for?" Ava folded her hands slowly. "I'm just a passenger," she said, voice even. "But I document patterns. That's what I do." He didn't know what to say to that, but soon he wouldn't need to. Because something far bigger than a boarding pass check was coming, and it had just cleared security. The knock came exactly 11 minutes later. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't loud. But it was final. The security officer jumped slightly and looked toward the door. It opened slowly, and in stepped a tall woman in a charcoal gray suit, FAA credentials hanging discreetly from her belt. Not visible, but ready if needed. Behind her, a man in a blue polo shirt with an ID badge labeled Federal Compliance Oversight nodded briefly, then closed the door behind them. "Ms. Montgomery," the woman said evenly, but not coldly. "You can come with us now." The officer blinked. "Wait, I was told DHS was verifying—" "We're handling it," she interrupted, her tone absolute. "You're dismissed from this case." Ava Rose collected what remained of her belongings, her phone, her laptop bag, and the torn fragments of her passport placed in a sealed evidence pouch, and followed the 2 agents without a word. Outside the room, a corridor led to a side operations office where a secure command post had been temporarily established. Inside, a monitor wall displayed multiple live feeds, Gate 3, security checkpoints, staff lounge areas, and the main terminal hub. It wasn't just about Ava anymore. This was a federal response. "Situation escalated faster than we anticipated," said the man in the polo. "Your signal triggered a full compliance sweep on Air Vista. We've locked the system activity at Gate 3 starting from 8:40 a.m. this morning. That includes internal messages, intercom logs, and employee keycard entries." The woman in the suit added, "We've already pulled Susan Blackwell's employee file. 3 informal complaints of discriminatory behavior, none escalated beyond HR's counseling. This morning's incident crossed the line, visibly, publicly." Ava looked at the screen showing Susan still at the gate, laughing with a colleague. Her body language was cocky. She hadn't realized anything had changed. She still thought she was the one in power. "There's a pattern," Ava said quietly, but her words cut through the room. "It didn't start today. This gate has been a microcosm of a much bigger issue. I've logged 27 separate anomalies in passenger treatment over the last 4 weeks. Delays, denials, forced downgrades. 17 of them involved passengers of color. 11 were women traveling alone." The room stilled. She continued, "Susan isn't the system, but she's been allowed to thrive within it." One of the tech officers monitoring data feeds spoke up. "We just got a hit. Her internal chat log this morning, she messaged another gate agent, another business-class beauty trying to fly her way into a lifestyle. Watch me handle this one. Timestamp, 6 minutes before you arrived." No one said a word. They didn't need to. Outside, the airport carried on as usual. Flights departed, announcements echoed, and travelers wheeled their suitcases past each other without a clue that a federal investigation had just rooted itself beneath their feet. But Ava knew. She had designed this kind of operation herself. The key was always discretion, until it was time to surface. Her replacement would arrive tomorrow to finish the passenger interviews under the guise of survey research. Susan and her team would be placed on temporary leave by mid-afternoon. And Air Vista Corporate? They'd already received a request for immediate cooperation from FAA Legal, plus a warning. This incident had gone public, and congressional eyes were now watching. As the operation team finished debriefing, Ava stepped aside to call her daughter. The girl answered on the second ring. "Hey, baby," Ava said softly, "I'm okay." "You sure?" her daughter asked. "I saw the clip online. It's everywhere." "I know, but that's good. Let them see it. It's not about me." A pause. "I saw how you stood there. You didn't move." "I couldn't," Ava said. "I needed them to reveal themselves fully." From the hallway, the agent in the suit gestured gently. "Media is requesting comment. We can shield your identity if you want." Ava shook her head. "No press," she said. "Not yet. This isn't about revenge. It's about a record." She ended the call and walked back toward the command room, her pace steady, her presence unmistakable. For weeks, she had blended in, observing, collecting, being underestimated. But now the investigation was live. The shield was off. Ava Montgomery didn't need to raise her voice. She only needed the truth to echo louder than the lies that tried to silence her. 2 uniformed officers approached Ava without ceremony. No explanation. No gentle request. One simply said, "You'll need to come with us." She didn't resist. She didn't ask why. She just turned and walked silently beside them, as dozens of eyes followed her down the corridor. Some curious, some smirking, some satisfied. She glanced up once at the dome of the ceiling where a small red light blinked behind a security camera. That was enough. That single look would later become a timestamp in the FAA's internal file. Susan, meanwhile, stood tall back at the gate counter. She spoke to a supervisor with animated gestures, holding up pieces of the torn passport like a hunter returning from a kill. "The woman's ID was off. Probably forged. Definitely not real," she said. "Tried to get into business class with a fake name. I reported her immediately." Her tone was proud, like she'd done a public service. The supervisor raised an eyebrow. "Did you verify with a secondary scan?" Susan scoffed. She didn't even belong there. In a windowless room near Terminal B, Ava was told to sit. No lawyer, no phone call. 2 hours passed. The air conditioning rattled overhead. A man in a dark green DHS vest entered and sat across from her, flipping a folder lazily. His badge was half tucked into his chest pocket. He didn't introduce himself. "So," he said flatly, "what are you doing in business class?" Ava said nothing. He tapped the folder. "Your name triggered a flag. Does that happen often to you?" Still silence. He leaned back, arms crossed. "Are you a refugee? You running from something? Maybe flying on someone else's dime?" Ava looked up at him slowly, not angry, just sharp. "You're asking the wrong questions." He blinked, caught off guard by her tone. Back at Gate 3, a teenage girl in a denim jacket was scrolling on her phone. She looked up once as the screen loaded, then widened her eyes. She tapped her mother beside her and whispered, "Mom, that woman, the one they took away, she's going viral." She turned her phone so her mother could see. A 14-second video had just been posted on X. It showed Susan snapping the passport in half. Ava, standing silently. The security call. The phone caption read, "Gate agent tears up black woman's passport over suspicion. The woman doesn't resist. This is America." Within minutes, the clip hit 50,000 views. Within the hour, it passed 600,000. At Concourse C, an FAA technician disguised as an airline maintenance contractor saw the clip appear in a private watchdog forum she monitored. She immediately logged into a secure terminal disguised as a check-in kiosk and transmitted a red-level alert. The alert code was known to only a handful of operatives. Field agent in compromised status. Trigger visibility protocol. She didn't know who the woman was, but the quiet in her posture told her everything she needed. By the time the signal reached FAA servers in Washington, a secure protocol launched automatically. Surveillance footage from Gate 3, multiple angles, was pulled in real time and uploaded into encrypted archives. Facial recognition was run on Susan and the officers who escorted Ava. Keyword tracking flagged Susan's name in 3 internal passenger complaints over the last 30 days. None escalated. One read, "Gate agent made repeated comments about travelers not looking like first class." Another noted, "I was told my worn passport looked like it came from a street vendor." The building case deepened. Back in the holding room, Ava was offered a deal. An older man entered, this time in a civilian blazer, not a uniform. "Look," he began, softer than the others. "No one wants to ruin your life over this. If you just admit the passport's a fake, we can avoid charges. Quiet fix. You walk away." Ava raised an eyebrow. "Is that a threat?" He shrugged. "It's an option. If you prefer a full background audit, we can go that route." Ava folded her arms. "You have no idea whose file you're building, do you?" The man didn't answer. He just shifted uncomfortably and left. At precisely 3:33 p.m., a black SUV with federal plates pulled up to the staff-only entrance near terminal operations. 3 individuals stepped out, dressed in identical gray suits. One flashed ID. The others carried a slim briefcase and a secure tablet. They moved quickly and with purpose. When they entered the building, no one tried to stop them. At that exact moment, the airport's general manager, seated in a staff meeting about flight delays, was handed a silent notification. He froze when he saw the words, "FAA Inspection Team, Authorization Level 4, Immediate Entry Granted." "Is this a drill?" he asked. No one answered. By the time the team reached Gate 3, Susan had been asked to step aside. Her face was flushed, confused, then pale as she recognized the federal seal. She tried to speak. One of the agents held up a hand. "We are not here for explanations." In the adjacent briefing room, the lead agent cleared her throat and read from a document. "Federal Aviation Administration, Compliance Inspection Number 117, Delta District. Subjects, systemic racial discrimination, abuse of authority, and unauthorized destruction of federal identification." The room went silent. Susan opened her mouth, closed it again. And Ava, unseen behind the one-way mirror in the next room, watched it all unfold, still silent, still waiting. In the secure viewing room adjacent to the operations office, Ava remained composed. The one-way glass in front of her revealed everything. The trembling hands of the regional director as he scanned the inspection notice, the rigid posture of the HR representative trying to appear useful, and Susan's posture collapsing inch by inch with each passing second. For the first time since that morning, Ava allowed herself a small breath, not satisfaction, not relief, just precision. Because what was unfolding on the other side of the glass wasn't personal revenge, it was systemic exposure. In the adjacent room, the FAA inspection team was unfolding layers that no one at Air Vista had prepared for. An agent pulled up a list of passengers flagged for manual identity verification in the last 45 days. Of the 61 entries, over 40 had traditionally Black or Hispanic names. Another agent traced internal messaging threads, some of them private Slack conversations between Susan and two other gate agents. One message read, "You'd think they'd know better by now. If you can't dress the part, you can't fly the part." Another, "This one today came in acting like she owned the airport. Not anymore." Screenshots were printed, marked with red tabs and placed neatly in evidence folders. Each detail was calmly read aloud into the record. There were no raised voices, no drama, just the sound of a system being cracked open. The regional manager tried to regain control. "We had no idea any of this was happening," he said, voice barely hiding the tremor. "We don't endorse discrimination. If we knew..." The lead inspector cut him off. "You did know. You had complaints. You had the data. You just chose not to read it." Susan finally spoke. "She didn't even look like she belonged in business class," she muttered, more to herself than anyone else. But the room heard it, and wrote it down. Meanwhile, on the other side of the airport, the viral clip had passed 1.2 million views. Civil rights attorneys were quoting it. News anchors were looping it. Travelers in other terminals were showing it to each other in real time. A CNN correspondent tweeted, "Sources confirm woman in passport incident may be a federal investigator. FAA presence now confirmed at Atlanta's Gate 3. Story developing." Inside the viewing room, Ava remained still, watching the unraveling. The pressure was working, but the damage had to be thorough. Not for punishment, for precedent. Back in the interrogation wing, the man in the DHS vest, the same one who'd questioned Ava for hours, was being confronted by an FAA legal advisor. "Did you threaten the passenger with legal action in exchange for a confession?" The man hesitated. "She was uncooperative," he said. "Did you confirm her identity through CBP's secure traveler system?" The man looked away. "That system didn't load." The legal advisor held up a tablet showing a time log. "It loaded, you just didn't use it." Susan was escorted out of the room at 3:58 p.m. She wasn't in handcuffs, but she might as well have been. A crowd had gathered near the glass corridor, phones out, quiet but watching. A few whispered, "Is that her?" Others recorded as she passed, head lowered, face pale. Inside the control room, a digital copy of the inspection order was uploaded to the FAA's internal case archive. The subject line read, "Operational Gate-Level Discrimination, Live Case Study 117DL. The report would be used to train future agents on how to detect systemic profiling, not just in Air Vista, but across all commercial airlines in the federal airspace." Ava stepped out of the viewing room as the agents concluded their session. A young officer handed her the sealed evidence pouch containing her destroyed passport. "Ma'am," he said, unsure what else to say. She took it gently, nodded once, and walked past him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. What had started as a silent insult at a gate counter had become the center of a national audit. But Ava knew this wasn't the end. It was only the point where silence could no longer be misread as weakness. And now, finally, the moment had come for her to step forward. But not yet. Because before the truth could walk in through the front door, it needed the system to sit still long enough to hear it. The briefing room had quieted, but it wasn't over. Not yet. The FAA team was finishing documentation, readying final logs for headquarters, when the lead agent turned and asked a question that changed the temperature in the room. "Is she ready to address the room?" For hours, Ava had been silent, observing. allowing the system to speak for itself and expose itself. But now she stepped into the room with deliberate calm, carrying nothing but a thin black folder and the sealed evidence pouch holding her ripped passport. No badge, no grand reveal, just the gravity of presence. The regional director blinked. "Wait, you're—" Ava nodded once. "Dr. Ava Montgomery, Senior Inspector, Federal Aviation Administration, Office of Civil Compliance, Lead for Operation Gatewatch." Silence swept the room like a dropped pin on marble. Susan, now seated in the far corner, looked up as if seeing Ava for the first time. Her lips parted. No words came. Ava stepped to the head of the room and opened the black folder. Inside were reports. Pages marked with tabs, data tables, transcripts, screen captures. "For the past 2 months," she said clearly, "I've conducted a covert compliance operation within Air Vista's Southeast Division, focusing specifically on gate-level racial profiling, travel discrimination, and internal abuse of discretionary authority." Her voice remained calm, controlled, but it hit with surgical precision. "In that time, I flew 10 routes under my legal name, never concealing identity, but never volunteering it either. I presented valid travel documents, legitimate boarding passes, and a neutral demeanor. On 6 of those 10 flights, I experienced delays, re-verifications, or downgrade attempts without cause. In 4 instances, gate agents, your agents, suggested that I had either falsified documents or purchased the wrong ticket." She turned a page. "I am a U.S. citizen, a federal official, and a frequent flyer in good standing. My travel behavior met every metric of compliance. Yet I was treated repeatedly not as a passenger but as a suspect." She placed the evidence pouch gently on the table. This was the culmination. A government-issued passport torn in front of witnesses. By an employee with a documented pattern, and you called it a misunderstanding. The regional manager looked like he wanted to melt through the floor. The HR officer picked at a pen cap nervously. Ava continued, "Your internal policy allows gate agents to escalate any identity concern directly to supervisors. In my case, that protocol was skipped, intentionally. That decision is now evidence of malicious intent." She turned to the FAA team. "Begin final interview documentation. I am invoking full-scale federal enforcement under Title 49 CFR FAA 1V44.209. Non-compliance with civil aviation non-discrimination policy. This gate is now under suspension." One of the FAA agents stood and started issuing verbal directives. "Effective immediately, all Gate 3 operations at Hartsfield-Jackson under Air Vista are ceased pending federal review. All digital access credentials are disabled. All employee messaging servers are seized, and all staff are to remain available for questioning." A uniformed Air Vista operations chief, who had just entered the room mid-announcement, froze. "On whose authority?" he asked, trying to recover ground. Ava turned. "Mine." She reached into her folder and held up her formal designation letter, embossed, signed, stamped with federal authority. The moment was nuclear but quiet. Susan finally spoke. "I didn't know," she muttered. "You didn't look like—" Ava cut in. "Like what? Like someone who had power? Like someone who understood the system better than you ever will? That was the point. I didn't need to look the part. I needed you to show yours." She walked closer, not with aggression, but certainty. "You thought you were protecting something, your authority, your narrative, your control. But all you protected was your bias. And now it's going to cost this company millions." Susan swallowed hard. Her hands were still trembling. Ava addressed the room once more. "I will be filing a formal notice of violation with FAA headquarters. A full congressional report will be submitted. Your license review will be paused until the civil findings are complete. And yes, the video is real. And yes, it will be used." She turned to leave, folder in hand, when the regional director finally called out, "Dr. Montgomery, please, can we do this quietly?" Ava paused. Her back was still to the room. "You made it public," she said. "I'm just making it accurate." She walked out, leaving behind a silence deeper than shame, because this wasn't just a reckoning, it was a record. Within 2 hours of Ava's exit from the operations briefing, federal activity surged through the airport like an unseen current. Gate 3 was officially cordoned off, with yellow Federal Compliance in Effect signs mounted discreetly near the check-in monitors. Passengers were rerouted. Staff were reassigned or sent home. The terminal staff, once smugly efficient, now whispered as they walked the halls, scanning for plainclothes agents with federal badges. Everyone knew something had gone very, very wrong. Back in Washington, the FAA's Civil Rights Division prepared its interim statement. The FAA has launched a full-scale investigation into reported discriminatory practices within Air Vista Airlines gate operations. We are committed to protecting the dignity and civil liberties of all travelers. Ava read the draft and gave a single note. Add, in collaboration with federal oversight bodies and congressional review. Let them know it won't vanish in the news cycle. Meanwhile, Susan Blackwell received a formal suspension notice via secure email. Her company-issued devices were remotely locked. Her name was placed on the federal monitoring list for civil aviation personnel. She wouldn't be working in a public-facing role again, at least not anytime soon. But for Ava, consequences were never the point. Late that evening, she sat in a quiet conference room inside the FAA's Atlanta field office. Two interns brought in final witness statements gathered by embedded agents, notes from passengers who had experienced gate-level profiling but had never reported it. One man wrote, "I thought I was crazy. I always got flagged, always asked to step aside. I thought maybe I looked nervous. Turns out I just looked black." Ava highlighted that sentence. She didn't smile. She underlined it with a pen and quietly added it to the appendix of her report. That same night, a renowned civil rights lawyer tweeted, "We've confirmed the woman in the viral airport video is FAA Inspector Dr. Ava Montgomery. This isn't just poetic justice, it's federal accountability. Let the skies be safer for everyone." The tweet was reshared over 90,000 times. At 11:12 p.m., Ava received a direct call from a senior congressional staffer. The voice was measured, curious. "Dr. Montgomery, we've been briefed. The House Subcommittee on Transportation Oversight would like you to present your findings on the floor next month. You've built the strongest live case on structural profiling we've seen in a decade." She gave a professional thank you. No ego, no self-congratulation. This wasn't about her. In the following days, Ava's name wouldn't appear in public statements. She declined all interviews. Her face never showed up in press conferences. What mattered was not the woman, but the wake of what she triggered. A reckoning built not on outrage, but on record. By week's end, Air Vista announced a comprehensive overhaul of its gate staff training, citing serious compliance failures. But their language couldn't conceal the damage. Stock fell 14%. 3 senior executives were placed on leave. Internal whistleblowers stepped forward. Lawsuits began forming. And in airports across the country, something subtle shifted. Gate agents checked their tone. Supervisors reviewed override logs. TSA officers hesitated before singling someone out, not because they feared a badge, but because they feared the next one might not be visible. Ava returned to work quietly. No ceremony, no statement, just a new folder marked Case number 1 at 18, Pacific Region. A different airline, a different state. Same system, same playbook. She placed her old, torn passport in a small case marked Evidence Retained. Not because she needed it anymore, but because someday someone would ask, "How do you break a system without breaking yourself?" And that cover, shredded down the center, would be the answer. 3 days later, Ava sat alone in a quiet gate lounge at a smaller regional airport. No crowds, no cameras, no suspicion. Just the gentle hum of a vending machine and the occasional boarding announcement over the intercom. She held a new passport in her hand, fresh, crisp, perfectly intact. The cover glinted under the overhead lights like armor. But she didn't open it. She just let it rest on her lap, heavy with meaning. Across from her, a little black girl, maybe 8, maybe 9, sat beside her mother, clutching a purple backpack and a dog-eared library book. The girl looked at Ava for a moment, then whispered to her mother. The woman smiled politely and nodded at Ava. "You work for the airline?" the girl asked. Ava paused for a breath. "Not quite," she said with a small smile. "I just make sure they follow the rules." The girl beamed. "Cool!" And just like that, Ava felt the ache behind her ribs loosen slightly. Because for every silent humiliation she had documented, for every room she had entered only to be doubted, every time she had to choose between dignity and diplomacy, this was the balance. Quiet moments of truth. No applause, just restoration. Her phone buzzed, a message from her daughter. "Mom, we read about you in my class. The teacher said you changed something." Ava typed back. "No, I just reminded them it needed to change." And maybe that was enough. She had learned long ago that justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it walks. Sometimes it waits. But the people who carry it, quietly, steadily, become the force behind the policy. The system doesn't correct itself. It has to be challenged. Not through rage, but through record. Not by shouting, but by showing. The public would remember the viral clip, the shredded passport, the silent dignity. But they would never see the decades of experience behind her eyes, the early career rejection letters that never said because you're black, but meant it anyway, the airport lounges where she was asked to show her boarding pass 3 times, or the conference rooms where her ideas were praised only after someone else repeated them. She'd spent a lifetime learning how to sit still while being sized up. And now, finally, she had turned that stillness into surveillance, that gaze into evidence, that silence into change. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it doesn't come in flashing lights or pounding fists. Sometimes it walks in calmly, holding a torn passport, and leaves behind a system that will never be the same. And if you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or doubted, let this story remind you. Your dignity is not dependent on how they see you. It's anchored in how you see yourself. What Ava did wasn't flashy. It wasn't violent. It was structured, methodical, and devastating in its precision. That's how change works in the real world. Not by burning things down, but by documenting the fire they said didn't exist. I've seen too many people accept mistreatment because they don't think they have the power to push back. But Ava didn't push back. She held the mirror. And that was enough to fracture everything they tried to protect. If you've ever felt like your voice wouldn't matter, remember, power doesn't always come from being the loudest in the room. Sometimes it comes from being the one who takes notes and then turns them into consequences.